Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome to the BOL Recruiting Show. I'm BamaOnLine.com publisher Tim Watts, and with me is Andrew Bone, the recruiting editor. A lot of years, as you can tell by the gray hairs and the beard, we've got a lot of years underneath us. And Andrew, I'll tell you, we've covered this for a long time, and these last 2 weekends have been a lot of fun, right? It's a little bit rejuvenating, the news you're chasing, the players that are coming on campus. Not really a dull moment, and a lot of high profile guys visiting.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are upset that there haven't been 20 commitments over the first 2 weeks yet, but uh, I don't think we expected that. A lot of people were asking us
No.
before before things really started last weekend. When are should we expect you know 3 commitments, 4 commitments over the first weekend? We said we don't expect any commitments really. We think all of these guys want to go through this cycle. They want to go through this month, get through these official visits. So many of them had set decision dates for later in the month or in July, and they want to enjoy it because it's really the only time they're ever going to have a chance to do these official visits until half of them end up transferring down the road. But I think that I think with Alabama, there's been a lot of positive momentum. Uh, as far as these first 2 weekends, getting these kids on campus, having a great time. You talk to so many of these recruits or parents, coaches that have been on these trips, and they really talk about the players that have really been involved. And a lot of people see it on social media from posts from all the freshmen, sophomores that are in all these photo galleries from the weekend. But it's not just that. These guys are spending a lot of time helping recruit, but also talking very highly about the program, the coaching staff, and what it's like to be student athlete in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, for those rushing to get commitments, that happened last year. We remember the outcry of commitment, 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 commitment. And hey, between late May and middle July, it was a smorgasbord, and it was all highly rated guys. Then class was back and forth with number one, number two, ended up number three. But what happened after that long surge of all those commitments was a lot of quiet. I think a decommitment or two. Caleb Cunningham decommitted. And really, the main recruitment there was Derek Meadows. So I think slow and steady. And Courtney Morgan tweeted that out. Basically, it's kind of funny. He had the tweet that's basically slow and steady wins the race. We had so many people. I learned so many people that didn't know what the tortoise and the hare story was, or the message to Courtney Morgan's thing. But basically, he's saying the 365 days is what's going to result in the best class. It's not going to be some hot 2 week stretch.
Yeah, exactly. And I think last year was a little bit different. Yeah, Alabama needed that. They needed to get some commitments last year because nobody knew what to expect. With that coaching staff who had only been on campus for 6 months, I think they entered the summer with 3 or 4 commitments. They needed some momentum, and fortunately, they were able to get their star quarterback in the class right off the bat in Keelan Russell. And once Keelan committed to Alabama, the floodgates sort of opened, and we saw commitments, pretty much every single week throughout the next 2 months. So this year a little bit slower, but I also think this is going to be a little bit of a smaller class than what we saw last year. So they're really focusing in on certain positions, trying to fill needs, and I think by the time we get to mid July, we're going to see a lot of the class, in the cupboard.
Yeah, I think the days of 25 and up are done. I think even getting to numbers 22, 23 range is going to be harder because there's no longer, we explained this on the Bama Online roundtable a couple times this week. It's no longer a steak and a handshake in a dorm room and a scholarship. Everybody costs money. There's nobody coming for free. You owe somebody that comes. So the best thing to do is get the highest quality player, especially out of high school, because you don't know what you're getting. Save some room, save some NIL money for the portal because those are the guys that'll be able to come in to handle you. But you're right, Andrew. We're a long ways. Doesn't Husky Harzen feel a really long way away? Husky Harzen, you remember that, right? That was a Kenny recruit, Willie recruit. That was I think we've just completely passed that as a testament to what a great job they have. Before we get into the other visitors news, and you can do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. We appreciate it. If you appreciate the show, the content, let us know. We'll be doing more of them. But that especially encourages and makes it a little bit easier. We had a live show yesterday when Alabama landed Sam Utu, who we're about to talk about. And you can also find us at BamaOnLine.com. $1 is for the first week. Andrew's worth 99 cents himself. And then Charlie Potter's worth at least a penny. So definitely worth a try for that first week. And Andrew, quick recap of Samuel Utu, because Bama fans finally got that official visitor to commit right after his visit. He was still on his visit when we were predicting it.
Yeah, it's funny. I think there were two guys that we've talked about this summer as far as we felt like, probably had the best chance to commit after their weekend visit. Last week or 2 weekends ago, it was Titan Davis. Now, Titan didn't commit, but he did cancel 2 visits right after that trip
That's
and
true.
narrowed it down to
Yeah.
Alabama and Michigan. And then, the other one was Sam Utu, came in this past weekend. Going into the weekend, there were some predictions that had flowed in on Washington for Sam, and I don't think we felt like he was going to end up at Washington. Felt like as soon as he got back to Tuscaloosa, especially after that first trip to Alabama back in the spring, his in-home visits with Coach Cap and Morgan back in May, we felt like Alabama was really going to separate themselves from everybody else. Now, was he going to commit right away? We were going to have to just kind of wait and see because he had visits to Texas and Tennessee coming up over the next 2 weeks, but canceled those visits, decided to go ahead and make that commitment. Told his mom Friday night. It was kind of an interesting story. I talked to his mom for a while yesterday, and it was such a great conversation with her, talking about the entire process and him choosing Alabama. But one thing that kind of stood out in my mind was when he was 12 years old, she told Sam, "Hey, if you ever have an opportunity to play college football, these are the 4 schools," and they live in Southern California. She said, "These are the 4 schools that I would move out of the state and move with you to." And it was Ohio State, Tennessee, Texas, and Alabama. Now there were some different reasons there. Ohio State was a favorite of her father's. Tennessee, Nico Iamaleava was going to school there, and him and Sam actually played volleyball together growing up. Yeah, kind of a wild
That's
story
crazy.
there. So they liked Tennessee, and then with Texas, they loved their the women's volleyball program. But with Alabama was a little bit different. Alabama was a school that she just loved. She followed it under Coach Saban. She was a big USC fan, but started following Alabama really closely. Well, on Friday night, during the visit, Sam came up to her and said, "Mom, are you ready to move?" And so she knew that his heart was at Alabama, and she was really happy. And we got a great in-depth story with her coming to BamaOnLine a little bit later on today or first thing on Wednesday morning. So go check that out. But great win for Alabama right there. 6'5", 330-pound. Probably an interior lineman, but could also play on the outside if needed.
Yeah, I think you look at that guy. It's a guy Courtney Morgan and Coach Cap really focused on, and they've done a good job. And we talked about this. Alabama went through a couple different offensive line coaches at the end of Saban's career, a couple different philosophies. And hey, it's always a big deal when the philosophy is different because it takes a few years to catch up to it. Bama's trying to hit that stride right now. Obviously, getting Proctor back and some of the other things that have fallen in place. Parker Brailsford Cummins kind of get them where they want to go. But they have a recruiting type on the offensive line, and we're not surprised by that. Andrew, so back-to-back weekends, we've seen 5-star safeties. Last week in Jet Washington, Kobe Bryant's nephew, who also visited Oregon this week. And then this week we saw Jira Edwards come in. Two of the absolute best in the nation, complete athletes, good football players. Upside, it feels like there's a race there. Could Bama take 2? I think it's possible, but I think there's some things that have to with the NIL stuff, it now affects everything you do affects another position. But both of these guys are going to be hard to turn down. But tell us a little bit about Jira, how we felt. And we had nuggets on this Sunday night. The news was so good. Usually we drop our nuggets on Monday, but the news was so good. We had them Sunday night. There was a lot of good news, and this was one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, out of all the storylines that kind of remain in this 2026 class, it's, one of the top ones is it going to be Jira or Jet as the safety in Alabama's class? And, as you mentioned, I don't think it's out of the realm that both of them could end up at Alabama. Now, do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. I think they'll end up getting one, and the other one probably ends up going to Oregon, maybe somewhere else for Jira. But with Jet Washington, certainly looks like an Alabama Oregon battle. But Jira had a great trip as well. Brought several family members with him to Tuscaloosa, and it was the first time that everybody had a chance to come down. His father, mom, two of his brothers, one of their wives. And they had a outstanding weekend on campus. Jira was a 6'2", 210-pound safety. Got really close with the Alabama players. It was hosted by Xavier Brown throughout the weekend, and he's come out and said that Alabama's at the top of his list following this trip. Texas A&M, Oregon are still two schools that he plans to visit, but with Alabama kind of moving up to the front, I think that says a lot because Auburn and Georgia have already received official visits from him, and there had been predictions, on the Georgia end already. Auburn side felt really good about Jira after their visit last weekend, but now Alabama looks like they're the team to beat. But it's going to be interesting this next week or two, especially if Jet goes ahead with a decision. Which way he end up going. Jira's not announcing a commitment until July the 5th, at least for right now. So it might be a race to see who commits first.
Yeah, and Jet has no more official visit. He can always change it, but he has no more official visits lined up right now. Jira still has two. I mean, kind of just moving in. And, interesting to see, especially last year. I think that the thing that helps Alabama the most is they signed one safety last year.
Right.
That's a one safety class. It doesn't now. He's a monster. Ivan Taylor's a good one, but obviously you can sneak another guy back in there. And there's, obviously, again, we talk about the NIL where you think you're looking more at quality now than quantity. And I remember the panic of, hey, the Alabama's only got 21 commitments coming up on signing day. I remember thinking, what is going on myself? So adjusted to a 16, 18, 19.
Just wait till this year.
Yeah, this year we're going to be like, whoa, 13. So anyways, I'll tell you another thing. Let's touch on Andrew Bond briefly is the quarterback. I mean, it's not getting as much love. I think Keelan's put so many heads to bed. They're rested. They feel comfortable with who they've got. But this next quarterback has been very interesting because just like the safeties, back-to-back five-star safeties, they brought back-to-back quarterbacks, the only two with offers in. Last week, they brought in Jet Tamala, who is still deciding. He took an official visit this past week. 2 weekends ago, they brought in Jet. This past weekend, he visited Iowa State. He's still deciding whether to come back to Alabama for an official. Nothing has been decided there. If he does, we feel Alabama's in good shape. But they also brought in Pat Ponatowski. I've been trying to say that one right. Hopefully I nailed it. But a very interesting guy because when I talked to Steve Wiltfong, he said he doesn't even practice football until it's football season. Old school, shows up in August and hits the pads.
Yeah, it seemed like he had a good time in Tuscaloosa, and he was around. He's from Cincinnati. He was around. There's 3 or 4 players on Alabama's team from Cincinnati, including Justin Hill, who he spent some time with, took some photos with during the weekend visit. But I think the quarterback position certainly, something that we're watching pretty closely. With does Jet Tamala end up making a trip back to Alabama after taking his Iowa State visit this last weekend? I don't know what's going to happen there because I would have assumed after that Iowa State visit, he would have come out and said, I'm shutting it down. I'm solid with Iowa State, but hasn't said that yet. So if he ends up coming back to Tuscaloosa for an OV, I think that's, and we've said this before, I think that does not bode well for the Cyclones. And I think Alabama really likes him a lot. Matt Ponatowski, situation with him, as you mentioned, with baseball. I mean, that's something that is going to drag on until next spring. Does he potentially get drafted? Does he go that route? He wants to play both sports in Tuscaloosa or Oregon or wherever he decides to go. I think Arkansas and Kentucky are also on that short list for him. But I don't know if he's got a decision date set. He is going to take that Oregon visit next weekend and then likely decide a few weeks after that. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I think all eyes for right now are on Jet Tamala. If he comes back to Tuscaloosa, I think that's going to end up being the guy. But if he decides to shut it down, stick with Iowa State, then obviously the Owls will circle back to Ponatowski and see what he ends up doing.
I tell you one little side story here that we're noticing a lot is everybody that visits Alabama visits Oregon next week or two. And it's caused a lot of anguish for people because Bama wants, every school has to dictate. They get to dictate when a kid visits too. So most prefer to be first or last, right? You don't want to be in the middle is the common thinking. There's no scientific fact to prove that really, but I mean, I think the Alabama staff wanted to go first. Very much loaded, top heavy, these first two classes. A lot of star power. I think it's 24 official visits plus Jet Tamala makes 25. He was unofficial, but 25 big name visitors have came in. Andrew, let's talk a little bit before we go further about guys that never get enough of our attention. Let's talk about the commitments and Jordan Edmondson especially because Jordan, Mo Linquist has did a great job there. He was scheduled to commit to Alabama. We had it ready. He decided to postpone because the school had construction. He couldn't commit there, and then all hell broke loose. Everybody said he got the bag because he had just come off an MVP performance at a camp. So everybody just thought he had the bag and everything else. So it looked kind of suspicious. They got worried. Well, then he commits, and we really don't talk about him enough, but he's a 5-star cornerback from the state of Georgia. Tremendous, tremendous football player. And you have some good news about him from this past weekend.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Jordan has been one of these kids that once he committed to Alabama, he's been really locked in. Doesn't really talk to other coaching staffs. Even though Georgia and Tennessee have really been pushing hard, did not have any in-home visits except for Alabama last month during the spring contact period. Even those schools were really trying to get in home and spend some time with his family. But he was back in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Brought some family members with him, including one of the interesting stories is when he had an in-home visit with Courtney Morgan and Mo Linquist last month. His grandmother had made some pound cake that evening, and Courtney was just in love with it, loved it. So his grandmother went back to Tuscaloosa this weekend, brought Courtney a pound cake, and the whole staff was munching on it throughout the weekend. And even Kalen DeBoer, came up to them and asked them about it, what it was, and just kept on eating it throughout the weekend. So they thought that was funny. But I talked to Jordan's mom for a while yesterday about the whole weekend. They just loved it so much. They felt like it was just just felt like a family, and they don't have that feeling anywhere else. It's hard to have that feeling anywhere else when you don't go anywhere else. But Georgia and Tennessee still trying to get him on campus this month for an official visit. I think Jordan is actually going with his team. Now, this is probably going to get out there at some point because people are going to freak out and say, oh my gosh, Jordan's at Georgia today. His high school team is doing a camp at Georgia. He is going with his high school team. This is not a visit.
I love you said it's probably going to get out sometime, and you literally put it out.
Well, because somebody's going to take a photo.
It's out now.
It's going to be on social media. And
hey, these team camps, we saw this last year with Luke Metz. Remember, Luke Metz took a official visit to Georgia. Then right after he had the team camp and all that. But I mean, that's pretty common.
And on the flip side of that, Naheem Alford,
absolutely.
And everybody goes, oh my gosh, 2 visits in a row for Naheem Alford.
Wearing Bama gloves. He was wearing Bama gloves. Remember?
Yeah, that he got on the weekend before.
Yeah,
so it was like,
yeah, absolutely
not that big of a deal, guys. But yeah, I mean, as of right now, we don't see him, taking any more visits. We think he's going to shut down the process. Even though I think Georgia has been really trying to push him to get on campus on June the 20th, right before the dead period. But Jordan's going to be back in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Once again, there's a high school camp going on in Tuscaloosa, so on Saturday. So Jordan's going to come back. I don't know if he's going to just watch the camp, possibly put on some cleats and go out there and work out with Coach Mo. Just get a little training session in with him. But yeah, I think getting him back second weekend in a row, really big for Alabama.
And look, as you get older, you want to look back and remember the time you went with your team to Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Auburn, Tennessee, and played in their stadium. I mean, regardless of anything else, you're going to remember that. On a side note, Chris Booker is going to be in with his team this week. Alabama's other offensive line commitment, obviously receiving a ton of interest from Georgia. That was a really good evaluation, early evaluation. Florida's been on him. A bunch of schools are on him. But on a side note, Andrew, let's talk about perhaps, and we saved this. And again, we want to ask you, hit that like and subscribe button. Do us a favor. It's kind of, we've had a lot of success this past week, and it kind of tells us how much time to invest here. But let's talk about the Wolves. Let's talk because that was like a big, Christian Robinson. You remember when Alabama hired Christian Robinson, Auburn fans laughed at him. Like it was an open laughing season on C Rob. And I think he's probably, I don't know if he's the best, but he's certainly one of the best relationship builders I've ever covered in the history of Alabama's recruiters, which is a mouthful. People love him. Recruits love him. Parents love him. Grandmas love him. And coaches love him.
Yeah, I mean, C-Rob's been a great recruiter. I think being at Alabama certainly has helped in that regard. It's not like Auburn was not a top program during the time he was at Auburn. Trying to recruit players to come there, especially when you're
Very
recruiting
hard.
against you're recruiting in the state of Alabama, you're recruiting in the state of Georgia. Those are two pretty tough places to recruit. But when you're at Alabama, going out there recruiting, building great relationships, it was never a lack of having great relationships for C-Rob, whether he was at Florida, at Auburn, and now that he's at Alabama. We saw that last year when he was able to go out to Ohio and get Justin Hill, really out of Ohio State's backyard, guy that Ohio State really wanted. And now in this cycle, I mean, I don't know how this is going to unfold with Xavier Griffin and Kamari Brooks over the course of these next 3 weeks. But being in the game this late, having Kamari Brooks, really struggling to decide between Alabama and Georgia when he lives 10 minutes away from Georgia's campus, I think is a testament of how good C-Rob has been on the recruiting trail this cycle. Xavier Griffin, 5-star recruit, was committed to USC for such a long time, but C-Rob never gave up on him. Kept recruiting him, kept pursuing, and just got off the phone with Xavier Griffin not too long ago, and he really talked very highly about the relationship he's had and continues to have with him to this day. So a lot of credit to C-Rob, Courtney Morgan, in their pursuit of those guys throughout this entire process. But with Griffin. And he still has the visit to Texas coming up this weekend, and then he's going to make a trip down to Florida State on the 20th. Got a decision date, June the 29th. Yeah, did tell me one thing he mentioned was on this trip to Alabama, he felt more connected with the players than just about anywhere else that he's been, throughout the last year or two. So that really stood out to him. We'll have a full interview coming to BOL later today. But then with Brooks, I mean, I think it's just going to be hard for him to say no to Georgia. There's so much pressure at his high school, in that community. Even if he did commit to Alabama, I mean, they're going to be on him all the way until the early signing period. But the fact that he hasn't committed yet, you never know.
I think it comes down to this went from a Georgia lock to this is definitely under consideration. I don't think anybody on either side of Georgia, Alabama really has a great feel for it. The one thing working for Bama, in my opinion, is he's a position fit for what Alabama wants to do at the Wolf position. Not as comfortable with the edge as he is at Wolf. That's kind of his skill set. That's kind of what he wants to play. So all those little things have kept Alabama in the game. If you remember, that was kind of how Bama really got their foot in with Justin Hill, besides, his mom who was headlocking him one way or the other to Tuscaloosa. But Ohio State did not have the Wolf position. And shout out to Justin Hill. We see him recruiting nonstop. He's in every kid's video. We know he's talking to these guys and working with them. He's talked to Xavier and he's talked to Brooks. I agree. I'm wondering if this isn't shaping. It is definitely shaping up a little like Rashawn Evans in Auburn. And I did not think Rashawn was going to commit to Alabama in Auburn High School in front of all. I did not. I knew Bama thought they had a chance, but I was shocked by that.
Well, he
and
didn't. He didn't, according to the to the Auburn Athletic
oh
website.
yeah, they tweeted out he committed to Auburn. That's a brutal one. Don't let that die. But yeah, C. Rob's done a great job. Xavier Griffin, and they see Xavier a little bit different, kind of like that Jihad Campbell, play inside, can play outside, but Brooks just a straight wolf for them. And I know again, Justin Hill's been very, very hands on with them. There's another prediction that with another recruit we talked about this week. Steve Wiltfong put a prediction in for him yesterday. Again, we had the Nuggets on Sunday, is a wide receiver. And, the thing to remember about this wide receiver class, we went through this last year. Alabama had Caleb Cunningham and they had Lotzir Brooks. They planned to take two wide receivers. We said it. So after Caleb committed, there was a whole discussion of whether they would take Lockhart, I think his name was, ended up at Texas, or Derek Meadows, who was committed to LSU at the time. When they say they're taking two, they're taking two. So this isn't expected to be a big class. There's only one guy that's for sure leaving next year. Jeremy Bernard's out of eligibility. I think everybody else can come back. So not a big class. So you don't need a guy that can immediately impact that 2 year away group. And Brian Williams is kind of that developmental guy. You look at his size and everything, but a wide receiver from Florida that we're feeling really good about Bama's chances right now.
Yeah, sort of a kid who emerged during the spring. I think he was offered in April. One of the first spring offers for Alabama. I mean, it was I think it was less than a week after the spring game. The coaches went out on the road. I mean, this big kid, 6'4", 190 pounds. Didn't have a significant number of yards last season. I think he less than 400 yards. But had 5 touchdowns. Long kid, great hands. And I think when he started to emerge and we started seeing a lot of offers come his way, was he was really dominating on the 7-on-7 camp circuit. Performing at a high level in these national 7-on-7 events, and started getting a lot of interest. Florida, Notre Dame. I think I want to say Georgia offered, but maybe not. I felt like Georgia may have
Penn State,
Penn
Kentucky.
State, yeah, and Kentucky. So there was a lot of schools that kind of jumped on him late, including Alabama. Jamarcus Shepard, that's one guy that I don't think you're going to second guess when he's going after a wide receiver and a guy that's really kind of moved up Alabama's recruiting board. They wanted to bring him in for an official visit this past weekend, even though Shep, Courtney had met with him. Nobody else on the staff had met with him, so they wanted to see him. Coach DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, the whole staff, support staff, everybody like that. So after meeting with him, I think that they really felt strong about him as far as a player. On the field, off the field, getting him into a film room, letting him be around players on the team, because I think that's one key aspect of these official visits when a lot of these guys come on campus, whether it's the first time or not, or the second time. Can they play here? Do they have the right mindset to play?
Yeah,
Because
mentally.
those freshmen, those sophomores who've been in the program, who've been through spring practice, who've been through the all the workouts and all that stuff, do these guys, do they have the capability to come in and play? Are they going to quit? And those answers are getting delivered to the Alabama coaching staff after these officials. So I think they like him. I think that it probably comes down to Alabama and Florida, even though he still got some other trips scheduled. But as of right now, as Steve predicted, and we noted in our Nuggets on Sunday, we like where Alabama stands.
The thing about with Williams for me is that Shep went and saw him in person and came back and they made a push. And I mean, this is people get hung up on ratings. Again, we're going to talk about this because there's 7 or 8 months left before the final rankings come about. At this time, Will Anderson was like barely a top 100 guy, I'm guessing, maybe not even that high before he really.
And the same with Dallas Turner.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of. Yeah.
These 2 guys that jumped out in my mind, Brian Branch. Those are guys that were, and Will Anderson and Brian Branch were 2 guys in the state of Georgia who weren't even offered by Georgia, and they committed to Alabama. After the summer, or I think with Will it was the spring, but with Branch it was after the summer. So some of these guys just get jumped on late. Rankings get adjusted, and
Well, you can't see everybody. You miss guys. You don't. Some of these guys just aren't seen. And the thing is, a good evaluating staff is offering 3 stars who finish 4 stars or higher. Bad staffs are offering 5 stars who end up 3 stars, which
Right. Yeah.
absolutely does
Absolutely.
happen. And we have not seen that with Alabama. But Andrew, I think a very fruitful weekend overall. Again, y'all can check us out, BamaOnLine.com. We're very accessible. We like to talk a little trash, talk a little TV, talk a little sports. Joe Tipton, by the way, a little additional nugget here, just reported for the basketball fans that Caleb Holt, number 7 player in the country, a very elite basketball player, is on an unofficial visit today. So this kind of stuff you get at Bama Online. It's not just Andrew's beautiful face or Blake Byler's great hair or Charlie Potter's cheerful and outgoing personality. You also get Steve Wiltfong, Chad Simmons, and Joe Tipton, who dropped a rather big nugget for the Hoops guys. We will have, Andrew, a preview for this coming weekend show for the official visitors. We like to do that on Thursday if we finalize the list. Sometimes it drifts into Friday, so y'all be patient with us there. But Andrew, give us a final thoughts. We're basically at halftime of June, which is the big, big month, obviously, for recruiting. Give us some final thoughts before we get out of here.
Yeah. So final 2 weeks going to be pretty big weeks because you got to watch a lot of these guys that are going elsewhere. I mean, obviously Alabama's going to have top recruits, but they've had a lot of great players on campus these first 2 weeks, and a lot of them are still undecided, and they're going to be taking these final visits. How's it going to kind of transpire? We feel good about several after the first 2 weeks, but are a lot of other schools going to feel good about these kids after their official visits over these final weeks before they start making their decisions? But this is going to be an interesting weekend coming up. Yeah, I looked at the list, and there's I think there's 8 or 9 guys currently, and might change, but probably none of them that I feel very confident that are going to end up at Alabama. But that's right now. That changes after the official visits. Said the same thing kind of about Brian Williams Jr. last week, and look at us all of a sudden. We're predicting them to Alabama. So a lot can change. That's some big visits with Brandon Arrington, 5-star corner coming in back in Tuscaloosa. Nick Abrams, 4-star. Roman Voss, number 1 player in Minnesota, also going to be in town. There's some other guys. We'll dive deep into that in our next video, but yeah, I'm really intrigued to kind of see how this weekend shakes out, and then the business elsewhere.
Well, Alabama's 8th in the team rankings, and I'd like to kind of go and looking at this list. The teams ahead of them, Alabama has 6 commitments in their 8th. The teams ahead of them have 18, 13, 13, 16, 14, 9, and USC with an absurd 28. USC is going to have so many guys in the portal. No, there's going to be a lot of that payroll next year is really going to be interesting to watch. But I think Alabama's done well, and everybody keeps saying Bama's behind. We're going to keep saying it to you. Remember, this is where they were last year. This is where they were. They hit this official visitor weekend with 5 official visits. Last year, they hit with 4. So they're kind of moving on. You want to see that pace pick up a little bit, but we're seeing them kind of making the right decisions. And again, this whole you shop, we shop, Alabama wants the kids to take the visits because in the day of the portal, you got to let them, you want them to know for sure they made the right decision. We appreciate y'all for being here. Again, you can check us out on BamaOnline.com. We'll have a show at the end of the week. If you like the show, let us know. Hit that like and subscribe. Leave us a comment. We appreciate y'all's being here. We appreciate your time. Andrew Bone, walk us out of here.
Yeah, thanks for watching us again. We'll be back later on this week, but if you want to talk to us all day, every day, we are on BOL, so come check us out over there.